Thanks. Thanks. Can everybody see my screen?
We can't.
Was that a yes?
No, I can't see your screen,
Great,
Janet.
thanks. Perfect. And we can.
No, we can't see your screen.
You cannot see the screen.
No.
Oh, let me try that again. And Andrea, did you give me sharing rights on this one?
I did.
Okay, let me try it again. Can you see it now?
No.
Yeah, okay. Well, it worked so well last time.
Let me try to make you a host, complete host. Try that now.
I am trying to get that.
Will FTE be identified, or can the agency decide staffing amount?
Agent, so we will have some Excel budget templates, but you can, each bid can determine their FTEs and what number of FTEs and what type of job description, what title you give them. That will be up to the agency submitting the bid.
So 3 to 4 properties will be RFP total.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question, Andrea?
Yeah, it's a question from Jesse. So 3 to 4 properties will be RFP total.
At this juncture, we know 3 for sure. We are anticipating 1 or 2 more outside of Seattle, and unclear. There, some of the properties within Seattle already have identified operators.
And that's Annie's question. What about the Seattle properties?
And at this point, if there are other properties identified in Seattle, then they would be bidded out, I believe.
That going to be communicated to us about when those are going to be open? Because I know like a lot of organizations may have applied specifically to be Seattle based. And so I think this is the first time we're really hearing about that. So that would be helpful for transparency in this process.
Yeah, I mean, all I can say at this time, Scott, if there's other Seattle properties identified, they'll be made known. I don't know if Mark's on the call and wants to chime in.
Yeah, hi Janice, thanks. Sorry, I'm in a tunnel, so that's it's cutting in and out, so I apologize. Hi everybody, thank you for being with us. So thanks for the question on the Seattle properties. I think we do have a couple of properties in Seattle that we have known providers, as Janice said. There are some additional properties in Seattle, and I suppose that there could be additional ones coming online as well. Those will go through a competitive process. The thing that I think we don't know right now is when that will happen. But I'm sorry, I can't remember if that was from Jesse or whoever the question came we will obviously we'll be providing announcements, making people aware in advance of release of those sites so that people can prepare. So that will be forthcoming. And a little bit, we ourselves are trying to sequence all of this work as best we can across our team's workload, the various permitting departments and those components. So I appreciate the question, and it's 100% valid, and we will be sorting through the Seattle properties as well and when those are made available.
Will any of the properties have like a specialty population identified with them, or does that just depend sort of on the provider?
I think it will depend on lots of factors, the provider, working with the jurisdictions too, who may, within chronically homeless households, if there's a particular subpopulation too that they, that we'll be working with them if they want to identify. They're, for the most part, as Mark, I think, mentioned earlier, they're large buildings, properties, some with 100 plus units. So, I think we're really open to looking at possible ways of, who's served, as long as they meet the basic eligibility of health through housing. Is it possible to have some specialty or subpopulations within the building? I would think there would be room for that.
I think to add to that point that you make, Janice, is right on. And Jesse, to your question, at a base level, we are looking to address folks who are living chronically homeless. And as we all know, there's lots of different sort of subgroups and populations that kind of exist within that. I think part of that will be, as Janice was saying, part of that will be defined at least in part with our work with the local jurisdiction. But I think if there are providers and teams of providers who want to put in for a bid on a property and suggest a particular population, do that and consider that as part of the bid process.
So this is Annie from Chief Seattle Club, and I have a statement or a question, I'm not sure which, about the CBO portion, where Janice, you said that, agencies might not have enough time to work with the CBOs. I know that for Chief Seattle Club, we would be very uncomfortable with any of the agencies listing us in their application unless we had formed a partnership with them. And I can only assume a lot of the other agencies would feel the same way. We don't basically want our name to be used to try to get points or get the bid.
Thanks, Annie. This is Mark again. That totally makes sense to me. And I guess in my mind, I couldn't imagine a situation where a bid would include a provider agency that wasn't fully aware and on board with them being part of that application. So I guess, maybe this was a wrong assumption on my part. I just sort of assumed that to be the case. But I think your point of clarification is an important one. And I think, and maybe we just need to state it explicitly, and we will in the bid documents, that all entities included on a bid, maybe they have to sign the form or whatever. But I don't think, I think your point is right on. We certainly wouldn't want to support somebody using somebody in name only so as to get points.
Thanks, Mark. I guess while Mark is on the phone too, because Mark, I sent you a private chat, but it sounds like you're calling in from your car, so you probably didn't see it.
Sorry about that. Yeah,
it's okay. It's okay. But part of it is about what Jesse said about the subpopulation. So in the in the meeting from earlier this morning, after you had stepped off, there was a lot of conversations from the outreach providers, including Chief Seattle Club, about that King County is using a very race neutral approach. So what was conveyed to us on the phone this morning was that you guys are going to select one outreach provider per geographic agent section. So for Southwest Seattle, you would pick one agency. And so it seems likely that you would pick a mainstream agency that doesn't have cultural competency in, let's say, Native or Black populations. Then you wouldn't get the outcomes that you're looking for those communities. And so some of the providers have just, even since the call this morning, we've been emailing each other and we're talking about getting together, and we want to meet with you and maybe Leo to discuss changing the outreach process.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And sorry that I wasn't able to be on the phone through the end of the call this morning. I mean, I think part of the objective of having these conversations, Annie, is exactly to sort of for you all to raise concerns or questions to us. And I think, obviously this is a very new program for us that we are working through the details of how to get it moving. And, we aren't going to think of everything and every opportunity. And so I appreciate, and sorry that I didn't see it in the chat, I appreciate that you are flagging that. And I think the point you're making is well taken, and that may be something that we need to your point, we need to consider how we integrate both on, I think, on the outreach side and on the, if a similar type issue is coming up on the operations side, how we take that feedback, your feedback, and integrate that into the process. As it relates, I think, particularly for the purpose of the conversation today, and maybe in a way that didn't show up sufficiently in the outreach piece, I think part of the objective of including kind of community-based organizations and other entities was to get exactly at the point that you are making around sort of race disproportionality that we see in homelessness. So all of that to say, I think your points are right, and I appreciate the comments.
Yeah, so just to kind of lay it on thicker, Mark. So, as you know, Native Americans are, almost 1/3 of the chronically homeless population. But I'm sure you could talk to any jurisdiction outside of Seattle, even in Seattle, and visibly, no one will see 1/3 of the people are from the Native community. So I guess I'm a little concerned about the heavy reliance on the local jurisdictions.
Got it. I hear you. And I think, we, just because we are working with local jurisdictions, I would just say, I don't think local jurisdictions, necessarily get 100% of the say in sort of what population that they want to be serving either. So, we are trying to be as accommodating to the various parties as possible. But I think your point is well taken, Annie, and I totally appreciate it. And I think as we work with a local jurisdiction in Southwest King County, for example, I think the question needs to be asked by us and by others, what populations are we not getting to as part of how we define that? And then how is it that we work to potentially address where that gap is? So thank you for raising that.
There's a question, would there be an expectation to make improvements to the building prior to folks moving in? Aside from program funding, we need to make improvements for security, amenity areas, et cetera, in order for our programs to run effectively.
Yeah, there would be opportunity for what we call either the tenant or capital improvements to the building. I believe we are budgeted at about 400,000 per property for capital tenant improvements prior to move-in. And that would be one important piece once an operator is identified to work closely with the operator, and we have folks on our capital side of the health through housing team who would be working with you on potential tenant improvement capital needs prior to, the program becoming operational.
Do we have any more questions, either in the chat or you can unmute?
I guess I asked this in a previous session. I'm still confused about the difference between supportive services providers and CBOs. I can't seem to get out of my own way in understanding that. Is the goal with the CBO just to have like other providers coming in to create kind of more of like a one-stop shop? So things, services are being brought to people at their lodging sites in addition to whoever the on-site service provider is that's actually operating and running programming. If somebody could just take one more attempt at trying to explain this to me, I don't know why I can't seem to understand it.
Yeah, I'll jump in, Jesse. And I think a little bit, this is a little bit to Annie's point as well. I think if we work with the same agencies that we have always worked with to provide services, which they do a very good job in doing, there is, I think, a reasonable belief that we may always end up getting the same outcomes, meaning that we won't get some of the disproportionately represented populations into our buildings. And so one of the things that we did very early on in the design of health through housing was respond to that statement by making this requirement to include or budgetarily plan for community-based organizations, so that people who have not historically felt like they could, either for a cultural reason or a language reason or pick your reason, go into supportive housing, that by having a CBO involved in that, or a collection of CBOs involved in that it's going to be more welcoming, and we're going to get to populations who are disproportionately impacted or otherwise not represented in our buildings in a way that we have not historically been able to do that. Does that make sense?
I think so, yeah.
So Jesse, Chief Seattle Club has been in discussions for probably about a year with the Lavender Rights Project, the Black Trans Task Force. And they're listed as a CBO, but they don't meet the thresholds to be listed as in the supportive services portion. And so it truly would be a partnership that we would do. We are proposing doing a single facility that would focus on Black trans folks, and then on Native, Two-Spirit, queer, and trans folks too, if that makes sense. And we would probably bring in additional partners, mental health partners, and primary healthcare partners as well.
An example always seals the deal. Thank you very much, Annie. Appreciate it.
Any other questions regarding this upcoming bid process?
I'm sorry to monopolize all the time too, but I did want to ask again about the Seattle property. So I heard either Janice or Mark, one of you said that, so is there not going to be an open process for some of the Seattle properties? You guys are just
No, there will be.
selecting agencies? Oh, okay.
So thanks. So there are a couple of properties where we have selected agencies. And so there are, and this is because we are, and I think we've said this before, we are working to address some of the historic isolation quarantine hotels or the de-intensified shelters where we have had operators. And so we are looking to move folks from those shelters, the people who are eligible for and who are chronically homeless, into our health through housing properties. So that is what we are working on in there, and that involves 3 facilities. It's the Holiday Inn and in North Seattle, as well as the extended stay in North Seattle, and then I'm trying to remember the other one that is and so in Seattle, those are those 2. Plus, we have the Inn at Queen Anne has been operated for a long period of time now by Catholic Community Services. The Canton Lofts building, for example, is a property that the county has purchased and is included in the health through housing program, and that is a property that will go through a competitive process. It isn't one that we've put out yet for competitive process, partially because it's not done yet, and so we need to get to kind of the end of that and figure out sort of what are some of the tenant improvements in those pieces of it. So that property is forthcoming, but will be included as part of a competitive process for the health through housing. Does that help?
Yeah, so are there other, I see for Chief Seattle Club, for us to figure out how many we want to go, we want to apply for, we kind of need to know the whole universe. So are there other Seattle properties that you guys are going after, or are you done now after Canton Home Office? That's it?
Right now, we are not pursuing an additional health through housing property in Seattle. And that is because, frankly, we have a number of health through housing properties, and we need to, as Janice was saying, we need to be working on properties mostly in the north and the east part of the county right now. However, that does not mean that we will never pursue another health through housing site in Seattle. I think partially it's how, the revenue picture for this program continues to improve as the economy improves. So will we have more opportunity because of that? Or other factors that bring in kind of more financial opportunity for us to invest additional funds in Seattle. While I think we are trying to balance, and I think we, for many, many reasons, are working to balance kind of the regional need around and how we acquire properties in different parts of the county. I mean, there isn't any getting around the fact that the need within Seattle is certainly very high. And so I think I can see a future where we do look to acquire another building in Seattle. It just isn't something that we are looking at, right now in the marketplace.
Any more questions from the group? Okay, I'm putting the link to the H2H pool provider list in the chat for anyone that would like to look at that. And again, this session was recorded, and we also recorded all the Q&A, so that will also be posted. Janice, do you have anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up, unless anyone has any other questions?
Yeah, if you go to that link to look at the provider pools, you go to the bottom of the page and look under awards, and then it's not quite as intuitive as it should be, but then you'll see the health through housing provider pools list. I don't think I have anything else to add at this point. Great.
Okay.
Everybody for joining us. I know for many of you, this was your second session today, so thanks for hanging in there with us. And yep, we appreciate your time today.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.